Welcome to another episode of Eye on Sullivan. I am your host, Mike McGuire, joined today, as I am each week, by the chairman, Rob Doherty. And today we have a really, really big show to conjure up memories of Ed Sullivan. But seriously, folks, the platform is growing each week. We need you to subscribe. We need to get up to 1,000 subscribers. We're up over 200 now. We need to get over 1,000, and then we can really bring you some special features here on Eye on Sullivan. We want you to be sure when you're watching us on YouTube to smash that like button and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of Eye on Sullivan. And as I said, today we've got an outstanding show. We got two issues that we're going to deal with today. Last night was the Democratic County Convention, and tomorrow night is the Republican.
Mike, not to interrupt you, but the Conservative Convention was also last night.
Last night. We also had the Conservatives. And what many people may not realize, and we're going to bring Rob in just a second, what many people may not realize is we get the holiday in November.
Correct.
We get all of the fanfare in November.
Correct.
But in this county, because of side deals that are made, very often Election Day happens in the dark of night.
Correct.
At these conventions. And so we just want to set it up for you so that you understand how some of your county-wide officials are actually selected by as few as a half a dozen people. So with that, we'll bring in my partner, the chairman, Rob Doherty, who has spent a lot of time taking a look at this issue. And Rob, why don't you bring our audience up to speed on the Democratic Convention last night, the Conservatives, and then tomorrow, the Republicans.
Okay, so that's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, I know a lot of times I hear people say, they have no one running against them, right? And you see that in town races a lot, and you see that a lot in county races. And the reason that is because exactly what Mike said is that the deals are struck long before Election Day. They're struck, in January and February, and then you're going into a convention, and then there's only one candidate to choose from, so you really don't have a choice. So now in the Democratic convention last night, Kathleen Lara, who's the deputy treasurer now, is vying for Nancy Buck's position because Nancy's going to be retiring, and we're going to miss Nancy. She does a great job always. And so she does not have an opponent, okay? So there's no Republican that wants to run against her. There was no deals in that situation. She was given the Democratic nomination, and then she also got the Conservative nomination, and she did not ask for the Republican nomination, and I don't believe that it would have been given if she had asked for it. So then on the Conservative side, again, Kathleen Lara had gotten the Conservative endorsement, and then Mike Schiff went against Tim Diamond for the Conservative nomination. And I was not in the room, but from my understanding, from other people that were in the room, Mike Schiff won that pretty handily. He took that going away. Now, tomorrow night is up at the Villa Roma is the Republican nomination.
And now, just to be the Democrats did not have a candidate for sheriff.
They did not. I believe Mr. Schiff had put in a letter asking for it, and they didn't even address it. They just moved on and acted like it wasn't there, which is fine.
Unlike what the Republicans do.
Oh yeah, well
they recruit Democrats.
They do that all the time.
Right.
In fact, when I ran for legislator last time, the sitting chair, Gary Moss, endorsed my opponent because he didn't like who I voted for in the Peter Oberacker, Terry Bernardo primary.
So you got punished, basically, for exercising your right to choose.
That is correct.
And so the policy after that was, we've got to stop this choosing stuff.
Correct.
Give them a candidate
Correct.
that they will either support or not.
You are 100% correct. And then Greg Goldstein had went on the radio on WJFF the next day after the election, and you can go on YouTube right now and look it up. And he said that I was brought in to take Rob Doherty out because Rob would not cooperate. And
You wouldn't vote for the people they wanted you to vote for.
And other things.
And other things.
And they asked
Which we'll
me to,
get into in other
yeah,
shows,
yeah.
episodes of Eye on
Yeah,
Sullivan.
I am not for sale. Thank you very much.
Right.
At any cost. And so tomorrow night, so just so you know how the convention works, so every town has what's called EDs, election districts. Now, I live in the town of Bethel. So we have 5 election districts, and there's 2 people per election district. And each town has a varied amount of them. Obviously, as you can imagine, the bigger towns have more EDs. The smaller towns have smaller EDs.
Mamakating being the largest.
Yeah, I think they have 38 EDs.
38 EDs.
I mean, they're off the hook. You take a town like a Sheckton or Tustin, they only have 1 ED, so they only represent 2 people.
Highland has 2, I believe.
They have 2. Lumberland has 2. Forestburg has 1. Thompson has 10. Then you get into a tricky spot like Fallsburg, which has 13 of them.
Mm-hmm.
But 11, 12, and 13 have like almost no votes in. So in the Republican Party, it's a weighted vote, just so we understand that. And everyone's like, oh, how does that work? So in our bylaws, there's 3 options to get to the weighted vote, but we've never done it any other way other than how many votes the Republican gubernatorial candidate got in the last election. So you take Bethel 1, for example. He got 206, Lee Zeldin, the candidate, got 260 votes. So you have Susan Brown Otto and Ruth Duncan in that district for Bethel 1. They each get 130 weighted votes. In total, there was 13,363 votes in that election, and then that gets divvied up by how many votes people got, Lee Zeldin got in each one. So when you come to the convention and you get your ballot, your name will be on it, and then what your weighted vote is. And this is important because you could have more people vote for you and still lose.
So it's kind of like the Electoral College.
Yeah, it's very much like the Electoral College. So, if your town tends to lean Republican, you're going to have more in your party votes. You're going to have more. And over the years, I've been to some conventions that had some pretty crazy outcomes. Mike, I don't know if you know about them.
I've participated in 2 conventions.
You
as
have.
a candidate.
You have.
And went into both of them with supreme confidence.
All right.
And being a baseball player, I came out batting .500, so
that means
bad.
you won one and you lost one.
I won one and lost one.
Wow.
And the one that I lost was a shocker.
It
really
was
a shocker to my wife.
Was it?
She can't figure to this day. Well,
No.
about 4 years ago, this day, she couldn't figure out what went wrong because she had those weighted votes down to the vote.
So what happens in a convention like this? Let's say there's 2 candidates. We'll say A and B. You, as part of one of their teams, you start calling your friends who are committeemen and say, how do you think you're going to vote? Mm-hmm. And then you start, trying to figure out which way the vote's going to go, mm-hmm. right? So the one that Michael speaks of, the town of Bethel, I was a committeeman then, and with my mother-in-law, the late Patricia Crumley, they were assured by the chairman at the time that all of Bethel would be voting for.
And we had
McGuire.
those. She had her tally sheet up on the wall, and she had those Bethel weighted votes counted.
Correct. And me and my mother-in-law did not vote for Mr. McGuire. We voted for Mr. Farrell. It was a kind of a funny story why I voted for Mr. Farrell. Our sons used to play baseball together over at the college on the weekends, and I would talk to them for 2.5 hours at a time, mm-hmm. and I became pretty friendly with them. Mm-hmm. And so we got in there, and so politics is a funny game, folks. So then, when I got elected as legislator, and I wanted to ask Mr. McGuire to become the county attorney, and you saw all the great work that we did together, I had to go to his kitchen and explain to him that the reason he was not DA was because I voted against him. Oh, and by the way, do you want to be my county attorney?
So that was really what it was. I remember people saying, we really have to move this along. But I remember people saying that you couldn't possibly see 2 years in advance.
Oh, yeah. So people said
Really, you had seen 11 years in advance.
Yeah, correct.
And that was part of your 11-year plan.
Correct.
To get yourself elected and then bring
Correct.
me in as the county attorney. And you know what, Rob? I've said this publicly many, many times. I wouldn't change a thing if I were able to go back. I enjoyed most minutes that I was a judge and did good work, despite what some detractors may say.
Yeah.
And my experience at the county attorney's office was great. Not many eggshells were broken. I don't think we were walking that much on eggshells.
No.
Today I was in there, and it was a hug fest. People, every office I walked by, someone walked out and gave me a hug. So it was a great experience. I wouldn't have traded it for the world.
You know, the funny thing about that is, I own the Worthboro Diner, and one of the servers comes up to me and says, "Were you in office before?" And I said, "Yeah, I used to be, the chairman of the county of the legislature." And she goes, "That's why so many people come in here. Now I know." Because she said, "I've never seen so many county employees in here before." Because they come in and they have the green.
Right,
the
lanyards.
Yeah, and she's like, "Now I understand why they all come in here." And I said, "Yeah," and I jokingly said, "Yeah," and when some of my opponents had said that, I wasn't well liked in the county, she says, "You gotta be kidding me. I mean, I see so many people here that I just read about in the newspaper, and now they're sitting here and we're waiting on them."
And
so
you sell a lot of eggs.
I do sell a lot of eggs.
And they're expensive today.
Oh, they're a little pricey.
You don't want people breaking and walking on those eggshells.
No, we want no broken eggs.
We don't want no broken eggs. And
So
you
yes,
have to break a couple eggs to make an omelet.
correct. So tomorrow night is the election. The convention, and then there's gonna be an election. And then Tim Diamond versus Michael Schiff. And on this ballot, the executive committee decided to put no endorsement as well. So you'll have Michael Schiff, Tim Diamond, and no endorsement. And those are your three options.
So no endorsement means that the Republicans don't have a candidate at all?
They don't have a candidate, and they're just going to go to a primary. Right?
Okay, so that's what it means.
Yeah. So then we're just going to go right to the primary, which is on June 26th, I believe.
Yep.
And then they duke it out, so you have 4 months of a pretty lively election. That one will be lively.
It'll be lively.
And generally speaking, in any county, we haven't seen it here for 20 years, but generally speaking, sheriff's races are quite lively.
Sure, because there's plenty of candidates, retired police officers that have the pedigree. So we will say to our audience, stay tuned.
Yeah.
Next week we'll have all the results. We'll be able
Correct.
to break them down.
Correct.
Rob and I will take you through all of the results and who's the candidates and what's happening with the primaries, and we'll get you set up for the primary season, which unfortunately many people don't even realize when we're going to have primaries.
Correct. And we will have Kathleen Lehrer on a show within the next month so that she can come on and tell everyone who she is and her credentials and how great of a treasurer she's going to make.
Great. So again, folks, we want to make sure that you subscribe on both YouTube and on Spotify. You want to smash that like button, always on YouTube, and leave us a comment, and then share your comments with others. All right, we're going to take a very short break right now and then bring in a special guest to talk about the unrest, if you will, in the state. Correction officers are currently on strike, and that's something that correction officers are actually not allowed to do. But it's not a typical strike where they're looking for more years or less steps or more money. There are some real safety concerns brought about as a result of legislation that this state has put in place over the last 8 or 10 years that is having the anticipated consequence in the facilities. And we know some legislation is having anticipated consequences out of the facilities with the bail reform. So we're going to be back very shortly with a retired sergeant from Woodburn Correctional Facility who is very much tuned in to the issues in the facility, Dave Cornish. So we'll be back in a couple seconds with Dave Cornish. Folks, welcome back to Ion Sullivan. We're very pleased and very fortunate to have with us today Dave Cornish, who's a retired sergeant with the Department of Corrections, most recently stationed at the Woodburn Correctional Facility. And we asked Dave to come on today because, first of all, Sullivan County certainly has a number of people that work either as correction officers or work in the facilities in their civilian capacity. And there's some real unrest going on in the facilities right now. We've got correction officers across the state, not in every facility, but in many of the facilities, are actually on strike right now. We've got a governor who apparently is lining up with the inmates, so to speak, and threatening to cancel health insurance, threatening to have protesters arrested, threatening to fire correction officers. They're all been docked in pay, and you'll learn today that correction officers are not allowed to strike. There is a law called the Taylor Act that does not allow certain people, certain positions to go on strike, which varies from what we think of normally with unions and collective bargaining. And traditionally, they understand that. They work often 7, 8 years without a contract. Rob and I saw that at the county.
Correct.
Where our correction officers worked at 1.7 years without a contract and then wound up taking a lot of zeros because the legislature did such a good job. Not your legislature.
No, not my legislature.
Not your legislature. The one before that. So, but this is a little different. This isn't asking for more money.
Nope.
Or shorter work days.
Nope.
Well, shorter than 36 hours, I suppose. So in a way they are. And so with that, Dave, welcome to Ion Sullivan. And why don't you just take a couple of seconds to let our audience know who you are and what your background is.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me here. Get to tell our story on our side. My name is Dave Cornish. I was Department of Correction for 17 years. I was a correctional sergeant. I was with the CERT team.
What's the CERT team?
The Corrections Emergency Response Team. So that's sort of like sort of like a specially trained unit. So we would do everything from search and rescue to cell extractions. And the objective was after Attica, they created it because of the situation that had transpired there with, such a mess that
there was a riot there.
There was a riot and there was people killed. And
back in the 60s.
Yeah, so there was in the early 70s.
Early 70s.
Yep.
Right.
And what happened was the state decided that they would create their own unit that would be specially trained, a lot more training than your average correction officer. Yeah, it was a very important part of my career when I was in corrections. Absolutely loved my CERT team. Love those guys. And what happened was, as my career went on, I noticed that more and more legislation and more rules were coming down against staff, against the Department of Corrections' ability to maintain structure and discipline. And the final straw was the Halt Act. As I read it, I told guys, this is the end of corrections as you know it, and this is how people get hurt. And
Dave, I'm going to stop you there.
Sure.
Because I want to unpack some of this.
Absolutely.
Now, there are those who would say that the Halt Act came about to check up correction officers who, by and large, were out of control, and these defenseless individuals in the correction facilities were being abused physically, emotionally, and mentally by correction officers who, basically had unchecked authority to do whatever they wanted in there. So why don't you take us back to when you started in 2005, 2006, and again, folks, this is a community within these facilities. You've got inmates, they get up in the morning, they go to breakfast, they have a job, or they go to school. It really functions like any community. So take us back to 2005, 2006.
Sure.
And as in any community, we have laws and we have accountability.
Correct. Yeah.
So what was it like within your communities within the correction system?
So when I started, you're right. It's a world within a world. It's the unknown world behind the wall. And it works a lot like your regular society. You have these, everybody is, they're getting fed, they're doing their thing, they're doing programs. A lot of them are doing college programs or vocational programs, and they're kind of living in a society. And, the main objective, according to the state and the Department of Corrections, was to get them back out on the street and not come back. And it had a pretty good response. Recidivism is a problem throughout the country, and attempting to get people to not come back get reincarcerated is a problem that we, as the United States, has as a problem with it. But I thought that they were doing a pretty good job, But what happened as time went on, and particularly around 2017, 2018, during the entire defund the police movement, is the rules started to get incredibly lax. They started pulling back on discipline. And one of the things that was created...
And when you say discipline, Dave, we're talking about locking a person in solitary confinement in darkness, chained to the wall, and a piece of bread is thrown in once a day, right?
No, we're talking about the discipline as you would find in your normal community. It's not okay for somebody, as you walk down the street, to just punch somebody. It's not okay to do drugs openly in the streets, or at least it wasn't. And to rob from people, steal from people. And there was a structure, as there is in a community, there is in a facility. There's rules, and if you break the rules, then there's consequences. Or there was consequences.
And what were those consequences? I want to get that out, because I want people to understand, because we get most of our information as lay people, we get from television.
Absolutely.
And so when we think about, they have these shows that take you inside these jails and these prisons, and you get the impression, and I've toured many of the facilities in New York State, you get the impression that discipline means a guy comes over with a bat and does a Tanya Harding on your knees.
but Mike, like any time a police officer, and you say, and if you're not in the legal system, you say something, like you watch too many cop shows, right?
Correct.
But the same thing I'm sure is true in prison shows as well. Like that doesn't happen.
Right. So I mean. Did you experience guys getting chained up in darkness for a year and have a piece of bread thrown in once a day?
No, nothing like that.
What was a typical kind of discipline that you'd have? I'm sure it's progressive discipline.
So it depends on the facility. So if you the facilities are broke down into security levels. You have a maximum security facility, and that's where you have people that are going to be put away for a long time, usually incredibly violent, and the rules and the structure are stricter. It's to maintain the control. Mm-hmm. So if you go into most of the facilities in the state, you'll see rows of cell blocks where there's most inmates have their own cell. We had stopped double bunking years ago, and so they have their own space, almost your own little room. There's bars on it, but your doors are open and closed basically by the officers, but it's still your own space. And if you're not following the rules for minor infractions, you can be confined to your space, basically confined to your room. This is where you're supposed to stay. You get 20 days keep lock, 15 days keep lock, 30 days keep lock. You're going to stay in your cell.
So that's keep lock.
Keep lock
is what you're locked in your cell.
You're locked in your cell.
Okay.
Yep, you're locked in your cell.
But now you get fed in there. And
absolutely.
You have toilet, facilities. And
you
all
do,
that.
And you do get recreation. What they would do is, if it doesn't have the rec out the back of your cell, then you would be escorted to another area where you would have rec with other inmates in that rec area. So there's a structure. If you did something very wrong, assaulted a staff member, if you assaulted another inmate, and I mean like with a weapon or caused major harm to somebody, one of the things that you would go to is SHU, Special Housing Unit. And this is where the Halt Act comes in. They called where it's solitary confinement, and they wanted to stop solitary confinement. So you have the creation of the Halt Act. So the humane alternatives to long-term solidarity and confinement. So that's where you get the process of the Halt. But what happens with the creation of Halt is you have a disassemblance of most of the other rules and structure within the facility. And if you were to implement this onto the streets, and you're basically like, okay, we don't want to have this massive penalty on the streets, and then everybody's like, yeah, that doesn't sound too good, and they slip in and let's basically get rid of everything else, every other punishment while we're at it. And they kind of hide it under, let's stop bringing out and, a firing squad. And then basically like, okay, and you can steal, you can do drugs openly, you can have fist fights on the street.
So in a progressive system, they're saying let's get rid of level 5
Yeah.
punishment, but by the way, we're going to get rid of 4, 3, 2, and 1 also.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it seemed like. I mean, you're not having a way to confine people for long periods of time, particularly in a prison setting, is difficult. So society sentences people for long periods of time, 10, 20, 30, 40 years life, and there's a reason for it. If you think that you can go into a prison and not have a way to incarcerate people within the facility, contain them within the facility, then you're allowing the opportunity for more issues. You cannot control the population. You make it as an environment where people are able to do nearly anything to each other.
So if, let's say, you're a guard and you're walking in the yard, and one of the inmates strikes you, what happens to that inmate?
Okay, so that's an assault on staff. So depending on the level of the assault, if he comes in and he pushes me over, that's an assault on staff. He's going to get in trouble. He's going to be put in solitary confinement, the SHU. But that also depends on his age. So if he's over 55 or under 21, he is there's a special program for them, and they do not get punished accordingly. Yeah, so that would be special populations.
So that's now, or that's pre-Halt Act?
This is now with
okay.
Halt. Okay. So yes, special populations is defined as incarcerated.
That's crazy.
So 21 years or younger, or 55 years or older.
So Mike, you and I are good.
We're good.
We're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that also now let's figure that in the gang situation that happens in our facilities. So I'm going to take my 21-year-olds and they become my hitmen.
Correct.
Which is exactly what we saw with Raise the Age.
Correct.
We raised the age, and then law enforcement would stop a car, and who would have the gun? The 17-year-old.
Correct.
You'd have 3 21-year-olds and a 17-year-old, and who had the gun? The 17-year-old, because they're now going to most likely go to family court. So what we have is, in the correction facilities, most of the people have been adjudicated guilty of something.
Correct.
Okay.
That's how you get there.
And in the max, as Dave pointed out, you've got the max facilities, you've got your murderers, your rapists, your very serious assault in the first degree, serious physical injury. That's who are there. And so you've got to now get that group and that community to function. Within that community called the correction facility, there are rules and regulations, and there are meted out punishment or sentences for violation of those community regulations. Some of those community regulations are also crimes on the outside, and we see individuals who are incarcerated being indicted and prosecuted again. But within, and we recall when Mayor Giuliani came in, he went after those quality of life crimes.
I remember
to
like
clean
it was
up the city.
yesterday.
And your sister was a police officer.
Correct.
in the time when
Correct.
Giuliani was
I
mayor.
lived in the city as well, and I mean, I say this all the time. There should be a statue of Giuliani in every borough in New York City.
Sure. So
It
the
was
Holt
different
Act
life.
did away with some of those, what we would call quality of life
Correct.
offenses. And we know that District Attorney Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, when he was inaugurated, he decreed we're not going to prosecute anyone for stealing under $1,000. So petty larceny was off the table.
Well, they have signs in San Francisco for just
in California,
that.
sure.
Yeah, they have.
So again, to pick up on what Dave was saying, those are the analogs outside the prison of those quality of life offenses where just think of what you have in Home Depot, Walmart, ShopRite in Sullivan County here, Marshalls. If our district attorney, which he didn't, was to decree we're no longer going to prosecute petty larceny, Judge Jankowitz and Judge Baum would be a lot more lonely on Monday and Wednesday nights. And think of what it would be like in those stores.
It'd be crazy
It
town.
would be anarchy.
Correct. And so basically that's what you have now in jails.
Right.
Is anarchy.
So you have the Holt Act come in, which basically, figuratively, puts the handcuffs on the correction officers in the facilities and how they can deal.
Yes.
So what now, 6 years later, after this has festered, what are the conditions now in 2025 pre-strike in these facilities?
All right, so Holt took place April 2022, implemented. Before that, it was already starting and go down a bad road. But from that point on, you have destroyed the Department of Corrections. So what we're losing now, staff-wise, is immense. I'm not sure if there's an exact number. I've been told this, that 50 officers a week are leaving the Department of Corrections over the past 2 years.
That's basically the city of Middletown has left.
Yes.
That department.
Yeah. So at the population, to give you an idea, so back in when I started in 2005, there was 64,000 inmates in the department that were incarcerated. We are at 33,000 now. So roughly half of the population of inmates. But during that
Well,
time,
and that's a tribute to the fact that crime is way down in the state of New
That's
York.
not the case at all, Michael.
It's not?
That's not the case at all.
Oh.
It's that these criminals are basically getting an education on how to commit crimes properly by getting 4 or 5 cracks at it before they have to go in before a judge.
And once they're in, we've taken out the cell doors and put a revolving door,
Basically.
so that a judge sentences someone to 10 years and they're out in 3.
There was a person in Connecticut that was eating someone's brain.
Right.
That's just a couple of years ago, and they're out now.
There you go.
I mean, they got out last night. I mean, it's crazy.
Delicacy.
yeah, I mean, it's just, but during that time frame, we've had a massive increase in violence. So
Increase in violence in the facility.
in the facility, and this,
So now when you're going down from 60 some odd thousand,
yeah.
right, and now we're getting rid of the fringe players in crime, and now we're just getting down to the hardcore people.
The core bad guys.
So now we have 30,000. We have half the population, but these are the bad
Yeah,
guys.
they are. And they are bad. And we've taken basically the accountability away. I mean, the facilities now are basically like the opium dens of old, where most of the inmates are high.
So
Zero
how's that happening,
consequences.
Dave? How is opium, whatever, fentanyl, getting into the facilities? I've gone into the facilities to visit clients, and even as an attorney going in, it's quite a process to get in. Everything is searched. Can't bring your car keys in. You can't bring anything in. So how are we getting fentanyl into the facilities?
Well, a lot of the drugs now are easily, they can be paper. They can be small.
Wait. How does that work?
Okay, so like something like a fentanyl, or a lot of your drugs, they can be synthetic drugs.
Okay.
And so what they can do is you can saturate pieces of paper. So if I can saturate a piece of paper with the drug, and then all you do is you take that piece of paper,
And then you just dry it out.
it's dried out, you cut it up, and then you smoke it. So now,
So how's that piece of paper get into?
so you can get in through the mail, you can get in through the legal mail, and the legal mail is a big issue
So when you say
because
legal man, you mean so an attorney is sending
Yes.
his client a document.
yes. So if we are not allowed to sit and read the legal correspondence between inmates and their attorneys. And what happens is they create false accounts. So we don't go and do a background of every attorney in the state or
It'd
the
be
country.
impossible. You
Yeah,
know,
and whether or not they were getting a package or something. So they come in, and what'll happen is you call the inmate down. He has legal mail. You'll take the package that is not opened at this point, and you will open it in front of him to show him that there's been no tampering with this package at all, and you're going to get everything that your lawyer sent you. The issue being is when we do that, we take a look, but we don't really go into the nooks and crannies of the paper because we're not allowed to read the mail. So if I were to go start paging through all this stuff, I would instantly be grieved by the inmate that I'm going in and doing
Reading his
something.
stuff, yeah.
I'm reading his
And
stuff.
there's a good reason for that.
Yeah,
So-
that
that's
becomes
fair.
a
I
communication.
mean, they still have rights, and to be fair,
Absolutely, I don't begrudge that. But we know with today's technology and the fact that the inmates have the pads, you could email most of this stuff and get this
correct.
resolved. You don't have to do this.
So the inmates in the facility have their own iPads.
They have a pad. It's not an iPad, but it's a tablet,
Okay.
and they have access to email, and it's almost like like a phone. It has games on it. They'll sit and play with their games all
In
day.
jail.
Yes,
Oh, sure.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So they can sit and have that, and that would be a way. That's one of the ways. So
Yeah.
we'll go back to how they get drugs in a facility. Another way is we have packages. So a lot of times you have where either family is sending in packages, they're inspected in our package room, but there's also vendors, and our vending system that we have is horrible. So nearly.
As the COs raised concerns about it in the past.
Yes, we've said that, these false Amazon accounts that are basically, they'll get this stuff brought in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's whatever it may be, a binder or something like that. And there's drugs within the binders, within whatever it is that is getting sent from Amazon. I mean, UPS is dropping it off.
Yeah.
So you also have the fact that you get it in through there, and then you get it in through visits. So we have in the state of New
You're
York.
not allowed to touch people.
No, that's not true at all.
That's not true.
No, that is only on a special instance that we would have a non-contact visit.
So in when I watch those movies,
Yeah.
and they say you sit down, you can't touch that person. That's not true.
That is not true in the state of New York under almost every circumstance.
Wow.
So we'll sit at a table. I could have you come over. You bring in drugs. You've snuck it in one of several different ways that you can get them in, sneak them in. I mean, we do scan, but also one of the things is the state of New York has bought the scanners that you'd use in an airport that you would have to get on a plane. Mm-hmm. And what they've done is made it optional for the visitors if they want to go through it or not.
So hold on. So we have scanners.
Yes.
And now I'm saying, I don't feel like being scanned today. I'm just going to walk around this scan. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. Not only you think that's wild.
They'll do a pat down of that person.
Yeah. They're also
Hey, Benny, that put that nice.
the inmates don't have to go through the scanners either.
Right.
They can opt out.
Then why do we have scanners?
That's a great question, and I don't know how to answer that.
So let's just back up here. So now they can get drugs through paper that could be inside a legitimate documentation.
Yes.
Or fake documentation because
It's usually fake. Yes,
Okay.
fake documentation.
and you have no way of checking that. Okay.
Yep.
If they strike anyone, commit a crime, if they're between under 21 or over 55, you can't do anything to them.
There's hardly anything that being done,
Okay.
particularly that age bracket.
So if my wife comes to visit me, she comes over, gives me a nice big hug. I miss you, honey.
Yeah.
And then she could be stuffing stuff in my pockets or do whatever.
So
she
what they
does.
usually do is they'll say, like, I'll go, if you're visiting me, you go over, you grab a bag of chips, you set it down, you drop the contraband into the bag of chips. I reach over, take the bag of chips, reach in, take the contraband and the chip, eat it, because it's usually wrapped in something, and then
Cellophane or something like that.
and I'll go and I'll retrieve that later in my toilet.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. That's how it goes.
So how? I mean, so you have, you're lording over a place that has no discipline,
Yes.
no rules in order to discipline,
Yeah.
the inmates. I mean, it seems. So why would someone want that job?
That's what the problem is. This is where the governor is telling you to go back. And one of the concerns, so she made a speech.
I believe she said, "Go back and do your job."
She did. She said, go back and do your job. And I've said
And
this.
that's what correction officers want to do.
They
Correct.
do. We
They
want.
just want to have the handcuffs taken off.
Absolutely. They just want to hey, there's rules in society. What have you done to this place?
But there's no rules inside there.
No, you've, and this is.
Let's take a look statistically, Dave, because we want people to understand the magnitude of
Sure.
the situation.
So
So you said that this situation started to deteriorate as far back as 2017, 2018, when we saw the defund the police movements and the city of Minneapolis
Yes.
being burned down,
The
and
ground.
Seattle being
Yep.
taken hostage. Okay, so that was the summer that we recall.
So 2017. So this is assaults on staff. In
Right.
2017, there was 801 assaults on staff. There was 2024 assaults on staff. There's 2,070. So you have a massive increase of that.
So you've reduced the amount of inmates.
Yes.
But you've almost tripled. So you cut your amount of inmates in half. You've almost tripled the assaults.
Yeah, and and that is the assaults on staff. Now, let's say that you don't like staff. Any audience member out there, and you don't like staff, that's fine. The assaults on inmate assaults have just drastically increased, and I can tell you that an inmate assault is not a regular fight. An inmate assault is when a weapon is used. There's multiple inmates.
Like a shank or something like that.
Yeah, a shank. If somebody's injured in a way, they have a broken bone, something happens seriously to them. Otherwise, your normal fights are just fights. They're not assaults. And the state of New York,
Hold on. So go ahead, finish your point.
the state of New York doesn't want you to do a lot of inmate assaults because it's a lot more paperwork and doesn't make you look good. I
So-
can tell you that.
Well, the statistics don't make the state look good.
Yes.
So if an inmate is just having, two guys get into a beef, they throw down, they throw some hands at each other, that's not an assault. What'd you say?
Absolutely, that's not assault. That's a fight. And what'll happen with a fight is if you and I had, let's say, I owed you money and you came and you smacked me around. The best that we could basically do for that situation is we're going to get separated and we're going to go to different sides of the facility and kind of basically have about 3 days, and then we're going to get let back out. And
So we're going to have a cooling off period, and then we're going back at it.
absolutely.
So again, the detractors would say that this was necessary because you had inmates that were getting written up and were missing out on parole opportunities because the correction officers didn't like them, and just a minor disagreement was being written up as a fight. That's what the detractors would say. What do you say on behalf of the correction officers, Dave?
Well, I'm sorry. I got to tell you that it was that's not true because I've met many inmates over time who hardly had a ticket, hardly had an issue, or early in their career as an inmate when they first come, they had issues, and as they matured and started to understand structure and civilization and understand how to do the right thing, it stopped. And they didn't have issues. They kind of got their stuff together, did the right thing, and went out on the street. I mean, there was quite a few that, you wish them the best at the end. If Woodburn, the place I saw at the end, that I worked at the end, you're seeing guys at the end of their term. And a guy who's done 30 years could be very different than the person who walked in at 20 years old when you're 50 years old. So this whole thing that somehow we're always after and trying to destroy these people's lives. That's not true. There's thousands of inmates. If you're somebody who continuously gets in trouble, as you would in any other place, you're going to be, everybody's going to be like, hey, that guy is
That's
trouble.
the guy.
That's the guy.
That's
He's
the
a
guy.
pain. He doesn't, every time you tell him to do something, he's got an attitude. He's got an issue.
What are the issues, like, so they're striking now.
Yes.
right? What do they want? How does the strike come to an end? I mean, so I'm sure there's some sort of demand.
There are. And the thing that they want is safety. This is the number one thing. And how do you explain safety? So I can tell you from our facility at Woodburn, the other, last month it started, there was one of my friends was exposed to a substance, one of the drugs that is coming in and they're smoking. And what happened to him is he passed out. He was Narcan multiple times while he was convulsing and sent to the hospital.
Now, he didn't take the drug. He was just.
What had happened was he had gone down the gallery and he was checking on one of the inmates doing the rounds. And the inmate had placed a towel in front of his cell door. The way you have it in that section of the jail is there's a sliding door that's solid, and then you have a kind of a small window that's screened in, and he pushed the towel out of the way, and when he did, he got the air from the inside of his cell went into his. He smelt it, and he instantly was like, something's not right, and he was able to get out of there and get to help before he finally collapsed, started to convulse, and was multiple Narcan attempts before he was revived, and then he was brought up by ambulance. 27 people within the past 20 days at Woodburn have had the same experience.
Is this one facility?
This is Woodburn. This is right here,
Right down the
Sullivan
road.
County.
Yeah.
So 27. One of them happened to be a guardsman. So the other day when one of the guardsmen, he became sick, dizzy, needed medical attention, and an ambulance picked him up. These are the incidences of staff attempting to please help us. The response from the state, and this is where you get into where you wonder why they have had enough. The response from the state to the staff members, this was a week ago, so there's something like 15 staff members had gone out. The response from the state was that you are exhausted or it's in your head.
So the response from the state after this person convulsed
Yes.
and had to be Narcaned multiple times
So it's 27 out of 20 days. 20 people out of
27
in 20 days.
is that he was just he or she was just tired.
That's their excuse for it, that
And-
he was just tired. And it's happened multiple times. Twice we've tried to use Narcan on people to revive them. I know that the one the other day was so bad, and we want to get the body cam footage. We're asking the state to show us the footage so we can show the public. The distress staff is under because they thought they were going to lose one of their friends right in front of them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in tears attempting to revive this officer, thinking that this is the last moments that this person is going to be alive. And we want to get the body cam footage to show the public when we're talking about safety, the real reasons, some of the real reasons that were said, like, this is out of control. And this is a symptom of these drugs coming in through all the other pieces. Everything that we've discussed so far about how this has gone bad.
So Dave, this once again, this hour flies by.
Yeah.
Was there a inmate in the cell when the officer moved the towel out of the way?
There was
Okay.
an inmate in the cell, and he was lying on his bed, and he seemed to be, from what I was told, he was breathing. So it seemed as if he's sleeping.
Okay, so there was something being burned in that cell, or was it just something in the air system?
It might
in
have
the
been, he
facility?
might have smoked it earlier. So
And
this is,
and he was keeping the fumes in. To
yeah,
keep his
and
eye
what,
going.
so also too is this is not just staff who's been brought for overdosing, having these events. This is inmates as well. Where the ambulance has been there for overdoses for inmates multiple times. And this is not just Woodburn. I've spoke to other people from other facilities. Eastern, Ulster, I've spoke to people at Eastern. They said the scent that comes down through. You're covering your face. You're trying not to be exposed. This happened in January in Upstate Correctional Facility. 20 staff members, 7 nurses, 1 office assistant, and 12 officers went out to the hospital. 3 days later, 5 more people. Last year in Wyoming Correctional Facility, 6 went out to the hospital. This is multiple things. It's happened in other states. The state of Illinois, I was reading an article about the same instance with the convulsions, all
And
these
nothing's
issues.
being done about this.
No, nothing's being done.
Again, this show could be another 12-hour show.
Correct.
And we may need to do
Correct.
another one of these.
Correct.
So I currently am representing people, and I've presided over cases of promoting prison contraband.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a felony to have, I've got one now that the facility administered medication that the person didn't take, took back to his cell, and then it was found in his cell, and he gets charged with a felony promoting prison contraband. The person that was inside that cell, what discipline did he face, or she, because they had this substance in there that did harm to a staff member or to another inmate even?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No,
So
it doesn't exist.
This
we're
is the problem
tired.
right now. So you're, John Doe, you work for the prisons because it pays a good salary and you have good benefits and the swaps and all that fun stuff. How do you get out of bed every day knowing that you could be assaulted, you could be mandated for up to 36 hours?
The mandates are insane because of the staffing. The mandates are absolutely
Why don't you
crazy.
touch quickly on the mandate situation?
So what it is because of the staffing and nobody wants to take the job and they can't keep anybody. At this point, the staffing is insanely short.
We're losing
So
50 a day.
50 a week.
50 a
50 a
week.
week. So we're losing so quickly that officers work 16 a day, 16 hours every day, 7 days a week. Some 24 hours, some 36 hours. You hear horror stories of upstate. Trying to get a day off, you're lucky. As they close a facility because they can't staff anything, you have a moment of reprieve for a little while, but then again, those other staff members begin to quit. People who've had state jobs for 10, 15, 20 years. I know a friend of mine I worked with, he had 22 years. He left last week. 22 years before collecting a pension from the Department of Correction. He said, I cannot do this, and left.
And that's what's driving the suicide rate in COs. That's what's driving the alcoholism in COs,
Divorce.
the divorce rate in COs.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a serious issue, and the governor's just throwing her hands up saying, do your job.
Well,
She's not throwing her hands up. She's just saying, do your job. I mean, she doesn't even recognize an issue.
Well, it's not only that, as of today, she's said that she's going to bring legal charges to officers. She wants them arrested. There was a person in the media that asked and said that from what they're hearing is the officers just want safety. And she said, well, then I don't think leaving a facility unmanned is safe. And it's just a shame that it's gotten to this point. It truly is. These people, men and women, want to go and do their job, and they become the enemy somehow involved in some game with people's lives. It's just a shame. I don't know.
So now, just so that our audience understands, mandation happens in every facility.
Any 24 hours of facility.
Right. So, because these facilities can't close, they're open
Correct.
24 hours.
Yeah.
You have to have certain, Commission on Corrections says what posts have to be covered.
Correct.
So you've got that Department of Corrections handles it for the state. And so if there are not enough people, you get mandated to stay on. In our facility, in the county facility, you can stay on an extra 8-hour shift, 16 hours. Dave, you're saying that you have correction officers that are being mandated to be on duty for 24 and 36 hours?
Yes. Yeah, this is not new. This is something because like you said, you can't leave the facility. So, we have to have a minimum amount of staff where you'd just be like, well, you're going to have to stay. So now instead of the 16, you're at 24 hours, 36 hours, you're out you trying to survive. Some of these upstate jails, the horror stories I hear about mandated overtime is just insane. It's absolutely
so, Dave,
crazy.
in the 2 minutes that we have left here, just put in a capsule for us how, from the perspective of the correction officer, and folks, we'd be happy to have somebody from the state, we're happy to have Governor Hochul herself on, Ion Sullivan, to talk about the other side of the story. We want to give you both sides of the story. From the standpoint of the correction officers, what needs to happen in order for the correction officers to go back to work, and then what needs to happen in order to get the numbers back up and get people to want to go in to this profession? In about 2 minutes.
I think first she has to stop vilifying the plight of the officers. I mean, that's a number one thing. I mean, you can't try to negotiate people's safety when you're just making them the enemy. And that would be a great start to stop with this. I mean, threats. She's going to fine people $1,500 a day for every day they're out. 10 days, that's $15,000. Why would I come back to work? I'm going to go find another job.
I'm going to quit.
Yeah. I mean, and so if you want people to come back, you have to listen to their needs. They've been screaming for years, please listen to us. Please listen to us.
So are you talking about really acknowledging that there is a problem,
Correct,
and then trying to formulate a solution? Is that really the issue here on a macro level?
I think so. I think they just want to be heard and acknowledge that, yeah, this pulls something back. Now this has created a horrible, horrible situation. And to try to get the two sides to talk, it's almost as if it's a divorced couple. But you have to have communication, and you have to understand that the other side has an issue, a true issue.
Mm-hmm.
All they're screaming for is, please help us, make us safe. That's, I think...
I think that's a non-negotiable,
Yeah.
being safe at work.
Yeah, I just... You're not going to have a Department of Corrections at this rate.
Well, you're going to have it, but we don't know what it's going to be like. Now, Dave, from your perspective, you started in 2005.
Yes.
And you continued on until 23 or 24?
So at the implementation of HOLT...
So 22.
22. I said this is a nightmare.
Over that time, you saw a facilities that had larger population, just as violent people, and a cross-section of people, and you saw them become progressively more dangerous, tied to the state implementing legislation that prevented the correction officers from keeping the inmates and themselves safe. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. It is a completely different world than the world that I first stepped into in 2005. It's a different world. There's nothing like it.
I mean, how are COs different than any other first responder? I mean, they're in dangerous situation, dealing with criminals.
Only they're living with them.
They are living with them, and think about the fatigue of being at work. After 8 hours. I mean, everyone talks about 8 hours. Now you're talking 16 hours. Now you're talking 24 hours. The fatigue and having to deal in those situations. I think it's untenable. I think the governor needs to recognize that something needs to be done today. I mean, not next week, not a month from now. Today.
And Dave, for our audience here in Sullivan County, is it helpful if our residents and our audience get a hold of Senator Oberacker and Assemblywoman Kay and let them know? I mean, we've got a lot of correction officers living in this county.
Absolutely.
Let them know that.
Absolutely. And I've been working with quite a few of the politicians in the area and just trying to let them understand the plight so that they've been very supportive. I think most of upstate New York, you've got a lot of support from the politicians because you can actually have a conversation with them. But I would tell anybody, please let anybody know about what's going on. We're begging. I'm begging and pleading to the people of the state of New York and the people of Sullivan County, help us. Help these people. We cannot vilify and just forget that there's this community that's attempting to control the worst aspects of our society and try to control it, rehabilitate it, and get it back to on the street. And that's
so,
all.
folks, this is really what Ion Sullivan is here for. It's a vehicle to turn the light on and pull back the curtain. Rob earlier filled you in on the rest of the story with the election situation. We'll have a lot more on that as we get into
Yes, Mr. Harvey.
shows.
We will, Mr. Harvey.
That's it. So that's really what Ion Sullivan is here for. And folks, correction officers, there isn't anyone in our audience that doesn't have a neighbor that's a correction officer.
Correct.
Your children's friends that are correction officers or work in the facilities. They're a massive employer within Sullivan County and the Hudson Valley region in general. And this is what they're confronting. They're not striking to get more money or more days off. They're striking because they're being asked to work 24 and 36 hours. Okay, is that the exception? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But 16 hours is not. So, folks, if you want to know more about this situation, drop us a line at ionsullivan@gmail.com. That's EYE on Sullivan@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe. In order for us to keep this platform growing and keep these kinds of issues, you're not getting them anywhere else.
Nowhere
You're not
else.
reading
So they're
about
talking
this
about-
in the River Reporter. You're not reading about it in the Democrat. You're hearing all sides, and we're happy to have Governor Hochul or one of her representatives here to talk about the other side of this. We need you to subscribe. We've got to get the numbers up. We're looking to get to 1,000. We're just over 200, I believe, right now. And you want to leave us a comment. You may see this issue differently. Leave us a comment. Maybe we'll have you on. That's how we got Dave on today, is someone
Correct.
left us a comment.
Correct.
And share your opinions about Ion Sullivan with your friends. Get them all to tune in. And when you're on YouTube, you want to subscribe and you want to
Smash.
that like button. Well, Rob, as always, this hour flies by.
Flies by.
We were so happy to have Dave Cornish here. We understand that you are passionate about this, but not for selfish reasons. You're passionate because you know that we've got dedicated professionals that are in these facilities
Correct.
that just
Absolutely.
want themselves to be safe and the inmates to be safe. When we're having no consequences, you're seeing other inmates that are being victimized by these non-crimes. So
Correct.
we've got to get this issue straightened out. And we call on Governor Hochul, we call on Senator Oberacker and Assemblywoman Kay, and our microphones are open to Senator
Correct.
Oberacker, open to Senator Kay to come in and talk about this issue in our facilities. And so that does it for another issue of Ion Sullivan. We would love to be able to have Dave back to update us periodically on how things are progressing. Hopefully they progress quickly and we get this matter wrapped up. On behalf of the chairman, Rob Doherty, I am Mike McGuire, thanking you and reminding you to subscribe, comment, like, and share. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Ion Sullivan. Have a great week, folks.